Everyone loves 20th Century Boys. It's in every top manga list, 36 million copies sold, multiple awards, people love it. If you ask someone why they like it, they'll tell you that it's a grand mystery adventure about uncovering a crazy conspiracy created by a supervillain who tricks the world into supporting him. And it's up to our band of heroes to stop him and save the world in the name of justice, love, and peace. But what if I told you that you're being tricked? What if I told you that you are not rooting for the heroes of this story? 20th Century Boys came out at the end of the 90s, which was a really bad time for Japan, mainly due to three things. First was the economy. Japan's bubble economy of the 80s popped in the early 90s, which crippled the whole nation. Japan went from extreme wealth and consumption to low wages, high unemployment, temp workers, NEETs, hikikomori, etc. It was so bad that they called it the lost decade because it felt like they lost a decade of progress. Second was the Kobe earthquake, one of the biggest natural disasters in Japan's history. On January 1995, the earthquake led to at least 5,000 people killed, 40,000 injured, and 300,000 homeless. This revealed the fragility of national infrastructure that was thought to be secure. So, bad economy, huge natural disaster which also affected the economy, and it gets worse. The third and most important incident for this video, the sarin gas attack on the Tokyo subway. On March 1995, 2 months after the quake, members of the doomsday cult Aum Shinrikyo boarded 3 lines of the Tokyo Metro and released deadly sarin gas by puncturing packets of liquid sarin with their sharpened umbrella tips, killing 13 people, injuring thousands. Yes, 20th Century Boys was made as a reaction to the sarin gas attack and the cult behind it, which is what the Friend cult was based on. So who are the Aum Shinrikyo and why did they do this? Aum started off in the 80s as a yoga class, founded by Matsumoto Chizuo, who later changed his name to Shoko Asahara. The class grew until it officially became a religion in 1989. And the thing about religion in Japan is that most people don't really see themselves as religious. Even when they do a lot of, Shinto Buddhist rituals like visiting the shrine for New Year's or praying to statues, for them, it's just what people do. It's part of the culture.
For the Japanese, religion is something more casual. It may be comforting, it may be refreshing, even fun, but it doesn't affect their daily lives.
So, if you ask Japanese people if they're religious, most will answer with a no. This is true in the 80s and even more so after the gas attacks for obvious reasons. And when people don't have religion, they seek comfort in other things, such as money, knowledge, status, or they don't. They just seek religion, and that's why the new religion movement is huge in Japan. It's estimated that 10 to 20% of the population are members of a new religion. It's also the reason why Shinzo Abe was attacked by the doohickey. Anyway, Aum was one of these new religions that swooped in to fill in the loss of community and meaning in the modern capitalist society of 1980s Japan. Aum offered liberation from the materialistic world through their teachings, which would supposedly grant spiritual powers to those who followed it, just like Asahara, who was commonly depicted to be floating. Remind you someone? Eventually, these beliefs evolved into something much more twisted, because they didn't just reject everyday society, they wanted to destroy it. Aum believed that their leader, Asahara, had been entrusted with a sacred mission to lead the forces of good in a war against evil. To them, the world itself is evil, and it will bring down anyone who lived in it. This is why members who tried to leave the cult back to the world of evil were kidnapped, tortured, and sometimes killed. Aum called these killings Poa. No, not the Brazilian one, but Poa, which is a Tibetan Buddhism thing, and that killing them would actually save them. So Aum became more violent and extreme as time went on, going from killing their own members to killing a lawyer and his family, including their baby, because the lawyer was leading the attack against Aum. After that, they tried to establish a political party, but completely failed because people thought they were insane. They were wearing masks of Asahara in the street, so, you know. This was a very important moment because it made Asahara and the entire cult believe that there was a major conspiracy to take them down. And it was the turning point where, instead of wanting to save society using his doctrine, Asahara wanted to destroy the society that rejected him, only saving his followers. This is why, after the failed election, Aum had this extreme us versus them mentality full of anger and hatred. They believed that humanity would end in a nuclear war and you would only be saved if you joined Aum, or if Aum controlled the world governments, like Friend did. So they continued their many crimes until they started to manufacture biological weapons, which eventually led to the sarin gas attack. So, what does all of this have to do with 20th Century Boys? What is the manga trying to say? Well, I believe that the manga serves three purposes in relation to the Aum incident. The first one is to give people hope. You know, the attacks traumatized the whole nation, the media was in an uproar about the dangers of cults and new religions, and 20th Century Boys offered a triumphant story against an evil cult, where a group of everyday people who are also losers rise up to fight against them. We have Kenji, who's a failed rock star, Yoshitsune, who's a timid salaryman, Yukiji, who's in an airport. Everyone's washed up. Their childhood dreams and ideals of the 70s, you know, rock and roll, space, the World Expo, all that wonder has worn off in the stagnant 90s. But everything changes when their friend Donkey supposedly committed suicide, which leads Kenji to the friend cult who are using their childhood mark as their logo. And it turns out the evil cult are also using their childhood fantasies as the basis for their evil schemes to take over the world. And it's up to the chosen ones, Kenji and the gang, to leave behind their normal lives and defeat Friend because they're the only ones that can. Eventually, they uncover Friend's plot to release a deadly virus on New Year's Eve and do everything they can to stop it, fulfilling their childhood fantasies as they stand gallantly against the giant robot. So it's kind of a power fantasy, like Captain America fighting Red Skull, mirroring World War II, you know, America versus Germany. But 20th Century Boys is a power fantasy for the people, because the protagonists are normal people instead of superheroes. Or are they? We'll get to that later. Now, power fantasies aren't necessarily a bad thing. Nothing wrong with a little escapism, that's what stories are for. The problem is when there's no depth and it's only a fantasy. This manga doesn't have that problem. There is depth, especially in how the friend cult is depicted. Which brings us to the second purpose of 20th Century Boys, which is to show how these cults work. It doesn't dwell too much on the people within the cult, they got some moments, but it's more about what the cults actually do and the effects they have on society. Specifically, it focuses on how Friend tricks society into believing that he is the world's savior. After the time skip, it turns out Kenji and his group are branded as terrorists, who tried to destroy the world with the robot and the deadly virus, while Friend is the hero who stopped them and saved many lives because he conveniently has the vaccine for the virus. Which doesn't make much sense, because how can you have a vaccine for a virus that came out of nowhere? Anyways, the trickery continues as the story focuses on Kanna, when she and the resistance uncover a plot to assassinate the Pope during his visit to Friend, who was supposedly killed by Yamane in the school. However, the assassination plan turned out to be a setup for Friend to get resurrected and save the Pope by shielding him from the shooter, leading everyone to believe that Friend is the world's savior, ushering in the Friend era, where the cult controls the world in a police state. using the vaccine to coerce people into obeying them. Tokyo is now divided by humongous walls, people are forced to live in old buildings, and they protest the regime reminiscent of Japan's student protests in the 60s. Unlike Aum, who fruitlessly demanded control over the government, Friend's cult literally controls the world. The manga is a hypothetical setting where the cult actually wins. 20th Century Boys, quote, presents the kind of utopia or dystopia a marginal religion would make, given the resources and opportunity to do so, end quote. Yes, a dystopia would be what you get if Aum's teachings are actually applied to reality. And that's the irony. The doctrine that is meant to save society will destroy it. Because it was never really about saving people. It was about appeasing the creator of these beliefs, Asahara. And that's why the irony is thrown away later in the story, as Friend outright says that the prophecies are a lie, aliens are attacking, and there's a newer, deadlier virus that will eliminate humanity. Understandably, his followers are confused. Is this really the guy we believed in? Is he really Friend? So most of them fight back in the new Friends group, but some are still loyal to him, as they choose to stop thinking, out of necessity. The cult reveals itself as what it really is, a childish delusion that destroys. I mean, Friend says Kenji Let's Play on the TV, you know? At this point, Friend is clearly the villain, while Kanna and Kenji's gang are the heroes. And everything goes right for our heroes. Kenji saves people using rock and roll, Kanna rallies everyone together for the music festival, her mom completes the vaccine. Every protagonist has their moment, and the people are finally on their side. The stage is literally set for the heroes to take and celebrate their victory. But Kenji never did play that song, and the mystery is not over. This brings us to the third purpose of 20th Century Boys, which is to show how powerful the cult's myths and stories are. You see, after the gas attacks and the dismantling of Aum by the police, a lot of Aum's beliefs and teachings were exposed for the world to see. You know, the doomsday prophecies, Asahara calling himself Christ, and the crazy rituals that lead to deaths or, drinking Asahara's fluids to join Aum. The common sentiment was that it's truly unbelievable that people were even in these cults believing such nonsense. Some scholars and journalists blamed anime and manga, because Aum had their own anime and manga, and most members, including Asahara, were big fans of the medium, as anime has clearly influenced the cult. For example, Aum believed that they were under attack by poison gas by an unknown assailant, so they used the Cosmos Cleaner air purifiers to protect themselves, named after the machine from space battleship Yamato that purifies radiation. In fact, a lot of their beliefs were loosely based on anime, so Aum were commonly said to be otaku who were unable to distinguish between fiction and reality. And otaku were already seen in a negative light because of things like the Otaku Killer in 1989. But of course, blaming a whole medium is oversimplifying things. It's like when people say satanic metal music causes violent crime or video games cause school shootings. The point is that people lacked empathy. They reduced the cult to a bunch of anomalies, a bunch of outcasts. You gotta be crazy to be in a cult. You must be one of those otaku freaks. What a monster. Are they even human? How could they do that? I mean, these rituals and stories are way too ridiculous for anyone to believe in, right? Well, Urasawa thought otherwise. I think he wanted to show how powerful these stories are, that they can completely define someone's reality. But he went for an unconventional approach. Whereas other manga like Believers focus on the human aspect of the cult members, their personal situations that might lead them to believe in these stories, Urasawa decided to make his own religious story. He created a myth so spectacular that people can't help but to believe in it. He created an epic with charismatic characters that have been chosen by fate to fight evil in this world. They fight through society's rejection and selflessly save everyone in a grand adventure. Yes, that myth is of our own beloved heroes, Kenji and especially Kanna. In the first part of the story, we have Kenji, who is a normal man fighting a great evil. The whole point is that he's the underdog, a common weak man of the 90s fulfilling his childhood dream of becoming a hero. But after the time skip, we have the extremely charismatic, supernaturally gifted, and capable Kanna. She is the leader of the resistance against Friend, the same resistance that uses violence and deception in the name of saving the world, in the name of Kenji's mythical figure. Kanna looks to her missing uncle for inspiration. You know, his rock and roll, his sacrifice on New Year's Eve, constantly wishing for his return. She treats him like a god, and she started a sort of religion in his name within the resistance, where people are singing his songs and telling his inspiring stories of justice. They see Kenji as this mythical martyr figure and Kanna as the chosen one. And suddenly we're rooting for a charismatic, heroic figure chosen by the heavens, wielding supernatural powers, leading a group of people who reject and are rejected by society to fight evil and save the world. Ladies and gentlemen, Kanna is the real cult leader. She's the one closer to Shoko Asahara than Friend himself. See, one of the main themes surrounding Friend is how everything he does is fake. From the robot, virus, assassination, they're either fake or staged. And this is used to show how people will believe in anything if they want to. The manga says it outright when Friend is pulled up by a rope for him to float, and the guy pulling the rope itself says he really is floating. They have complete faith in him. But we, the reader, we know that it's fake. We know that he's evil, so we see him as a villain. Compare that with Kanna. Her powers are 100% real. She can bend spoons, can't get hit by bullets, she's extremely smart, charismatic, lucky, and she's had these qualities since she was born. She is the chosen one, the daughter of the Holy Mother, humanity's last hope. Kanna is framed to be righteous by the manga, and we all believe it. And from the story, it's true. She is in the right. Friend is indeed trying to control the world with the virus, and the resistance is the only thing that can stop him. But isn't that how Aum wrote their myths? That they were the chosen people fighting the evil that is capitalism and the West. How Japan had been tricked by America. They've been tricked by Friend. And it's up to Aum to save the world. It's up to the resistance to save the world. We're supposed to believe that Asahara can float, predict the future. We're supposed to believe that Kanna will always win every time she gambles. That she can mediate a gang war with her words as a teenage girl. And this doesn't just stop with Kanna. After the time skip, Kenji also changes into this mythical figure who leads and saves people using only his guitar, his singing, and his words. Kenji's song playing on the radio becomes this rallying cry of hope for the resistance and everyone else in Tokyo. He's saving the world with rock and roll, just like his childhood dream. I mean, God himself is on their side. Well, not literally God, but Kami-sama, the bowling guy. He makes prophecies for the resistance, and they're real, unlike Friend's prophecies. So with the resistance being unfairly persecuted by Friend's government, believing in the mythology of Kenji's martyrdom and justice, believing that they're saving the world, having a charismatic leader with psychic powers who is the chosen one, Kanna, and having Kami-sama making real prophecies, the resistance acts as a religious organization. it's a new religion. And the fact that they do use violence and deception for the sake of justice and peace, they can be considered to be a marginal, extreme religion, a cult. I mean, Kanna herself, the cult leader, acts like a crazy cult member, worshipping Kenji's justice to the point that she can't live a normal life. She gets suspended from school because she beat up someone who called Kenji a terrorist. She replays his songs in her apartment all day, bothering the neighbors, and she also replays it on her music player, which is exactly what Masao, number 13, was doing for a friend in the beginning of the manga. I mean, look at their rooms, they're the same. But because Kanna and Kenji's group are the protagonists of this story, we don't perceive them as evil cult members, but as unjustly persecuted heroes. We are put in the same position as those crazy cult members, believing the same kind of story as them, and we don't even realize it. But why? Well, in the book Drawing on Tradition by Professor Jolyon Thomas, which is what this whole video is based on, Thomas mentions that it's because these stories use a certain narrative style called the aesthetics of extremity, where the extreme setting, like the end of the world, extreme antagonists, like an evil cult leader who wants to eliminate humanity, and the extreme protagonists with an extreme sense of justice, to the point that they are persecuted or in danger, these three elements combine to create powerful epic narratives that people can't help but love. This shows up everywhere from battle shonens, superhero movies, and of course religious stories where they use these qualities to make their teachings more attractive or to justify them. Like in Christianity, a lot of the appeal is because of how epic Jesus and the prophets' stories are, from the extreme good and evil to the miracles and persecution. It's exactly the same style that Aum used in their stories. But instead of the message of love, it's the message of Asahara's greatness. To sum it up with a quote, 20th Century Boys is a contemporary myth that seeks to explain, through fiction, the existence of cults and religious terrorism while simultaneously mobilizing the inspirational quality of an epic. And because of those epic extreme qualities, people end up believing in the protagonists without questioning the violence that they use or how similar they are to the evil cult that they're fighting. And it's true. People aren't reading 20th Century Boys for some weird allegory or metaphor. They're here for the spectacle, the mystery, the adventure. Who is Friend? Why is he doing all this? Will Kenji come back and defeat him? What'll happen next? Which proves how powerful these stories are, fulfilling the third purpose that I was talking about. But maybe they're a little too powerful. In an interview with NHK back in 2007, Urasawa seemed to be dissatisfied with how fans have reacted to the manga. I never intended to write it as a mystery from the beginning. I think readers assumed it was a mystery, and some people get angry when things don't go the way they want them to. People have focused more on the mystery of Friend's identity, or the spectacle, rather than the point of the story. And the point isn't necessarily the religious, trickery angle that we're talking about here. There are a few ways to interpret this story, but from Urasawa's reaction, I don't think most of them got through to the audience. Because it's not like Urasawa went out of his way to tell people anything. He talks through his stories. And he's a little too good at writing a thrilling adventure. So people just eat it up, not aware of the social commentary that it's making. So, Urasawa gave up. Kind of, not really. With 21st Century Boys, the plot was extended by another threat. An anti-proton bomb was set as Friend's final trick, and it's up to Kenji, Kanna, and the gang to stop it. I think the final 2 volumes shows how Urasawa felt about people's reaction to the manga. In the first half, the manga indirectly tells the audience that they are being tricked. It starts with Kenji refusing to play Bob Lennon, the Gutalala song, and telling Kanna that I'm not the man you think I am, which was mistranslated by the way. He says this because he realizes that Kanna and everyone else are idolizing him a little too much. It's like Urasawa is saying that you guys are missing the point of the story. It's not just about the adventure. So he deliberately skips the climax that the audience were expecting, same as the time skip on New Year's Eve. The manga also points out the fact that Kanna isn't much different from Friend. This is done using the UN army hunting down and blaming Kanna. They're calling her a remnant of the Friend cult because she's his daughter. And they call out her very suspicious powers. You know, hearing voices out of nowhere, seeing visions, literally praying to Kenji, screaming his name. Then, the gang holds the UN guy hostage to save the world, because Kanna found the bomb using the voice of her heart. From the outside, this looks freaking ridiculous, like a cult. Then Kanna also has a bit of a crisis when she thinks her powers don't work, that she's a fake like Friend. So they're telling us that Kanna is the same as Friend, without saying it outright. That's why to me, the first half of 21st Century Boys feels like Urasawa's last attempt at getting the audience to look a little deeper past the plot. But that's the thing, even with these fairly obvious scenes, if you're still focusing on Friend's identity, his final trap, the adventure, the mystery, the action, you're still gonna be tricked. That's why in the second half, the story goes back into the action-adventure fantasy with the hero Kenji coming in to save everyone from the bomb. It's like Urasawa gave up on trying to make people understand through the plot and just gave them what they wanted, the spectacle. You know, Friend's identity, Kanna regaining her powers, the robot turning back on using the legs instead of the wheels, the Gutalala song actually gets played on the radio. The story goes back to a fantasy. But the parallels between the heroes and the evil cult are still there. You know, the gang getting awarded by the UN mirrors the Friend cult. People believing Kenji will save them from the robot parallels people believing Friend will save them from the exact same robot. I mean, they're both using the same symbol. And to make it a bit more obvious, there's also a scene where the mangakas are discussing how to end a hero's story in front of the robot, paralleling Urasawa and his editors. Does the enemy reappear? Does the hero die? Or does he live to old age? And then Kenji shows up on a motorcycle. The point is that people want an epic, heroic story, and that these stories are powerful, because people will believe in anything that they want to believe in, just like the guy pulling up Friend. But the ending isn't all that bleak, because there is a difference between Kenji, Kanna, and Friend. Kenji and Kanna are human. They have moments of vulnerability and weakness. They're presented as imperfect, unlike how Friend and Asahara present themselves to their followers. And this is one of the main points of 21st Century Boys, humanizing these messianic characters. Kanna has her moment of losing her powers and confidence. Kenji beats Friend by apologizing to him instead of, a big fight. And of course, at the end, he apologizes to Friend for stealing the badge as a kid. And yeah, it's Kenji who stole the badge. So the epic, heroic adventure story is subverted by having a mundane conclusion, which helps the reader to see this manga as more than a spectacle, because they are forced to think about the ending. Like, it can't just be this mundane, boring conclusion, right? So they think further. Well, at least some readers, because if you look at the reviews and discussions on 21st Century Boys, a lot of people were unsatisfied, seeing it as unnecessary or confusing. So I guess they're still being tricked. In conclusion, 20th Century Boys is designed to critique and explain the existence of cults while also using the same extreme narrative structure of an epic that the cults use in their stories to trick the audience into believing in a religious terrorist group, therefore proving that the so-called extreme cults are much closer to us than we think. Does that make sense? I hope so. One final note, this video is based on the book Drawing on Tradition by Professor Jolyon Thomas, specifically the final chapter of the book. So shout out to Mr. Thomas, and I would also like to apologize because I left out a lot of details and I might have messed up some of the points that he made. So this is a bastardized version of those points. I had a hard time reading the book. I'm not exactly a scholar. So yeah, if you're interested, you should read the book. There's more details on how manga and anime influenced Aum and how people viewed them, the religious content in Ghibli movies, religiosity in Japan, which is, I guess that's the main topic. And yeah, other good stuff. It's a bit of a hard read though, I'm not gonna lie. But yeah, see you next time. Bye bye.